Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the hushed corridors of Edo-era Japan, where the warriors we often imagine slicing through battlefields with steely gazes and flashing swords are, well, mostly just standing around. Calmly. In silence. For hours. Welcome to the surprisingly tranquil, and strangely meticulous, life of a samurai bodyguard. You slip out from your rice straw mat just before sunrise. The air inside the barracks is cool and damp, tinged with the faint smell of worn tatami and the earthy aroma of oiled leather. Outside, the first blue light of dawn cracks across the inner courtyard. You stand, stretch silently, and begin your daily routine. Not the thrilling swordplay you might expect, but a long, controlled series of movements with your bakken, a heavy wooden training sword, meant more to center the spirit than to hack any limbs. You probably won't survive this training regimen, that is, at least not without sore thighs and numb feet. But hey, it's character building, right? Your day begins not with bloodshed, but with breath. Every samurai bodyguard in the estate begins by practicing precise steps, hand placements, and maai, the sacred distance between you and anything that might harm your lord. There's no talking, no clanging metal, just the soft repetitive tap of bamboo saws on packed earth, and the occasional low grunt of effort. It's all choreographed calmness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? I'm always curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your fingers trace the hilt of your katana, more a symbol of status than a tool of violence these days. You polish it anyway, as part of morning ritual. The scabbard is lacquered black, reflecting the shoji screened light. You aren't preparing for war, but for a meeting, an audience with your daimyo, who's already bathed, powdered, and perfectly robed. Your job is to make sure he walks safely from his personal quarters to his garden pavilion without tripping over his own sandals. That's not sarcasm. You literally once caught him mid-fall during a clumsy sandal misstep. The moment passed without a word exchanged. You never speak unless spoken to. Now you fall into line behind the other guards. You're positioned to the side, never directly behind, never in front. Your feet fall in rhythm with the others, and the rustle of robes and the whisper of breath fill the quiet hallway. You remember, to walk as a shadow is to walk unnoticed. Even among your own kind. Historians still argue whether these highly orchestrated routines were designed purely for security or were also rituals of discipline meant to reinforce the hierarchical power of the Edo court. Either way, you don't question it. You just march. Quietly. As you reach the outer walkway of the residence, the sun peeks over the high tile roofs. A palace page bows to your lord. You lower your eyes, gripping the hilt of your sword gently but firmly, thumb resting on the guard, ready to push it free in one smooth motion. Not that it's likely you'll need to. The most action you've seen lately is a startled crow crashing into a paper lantern. Still, you're alert. You watch the way shadows fall, the way the breeze lifts the garden brush. You even note how the koi fish move. Yes, some samurai believed animal behavior was a good omen detector. And you pretend not to notice when another guard lets out a sneeze mid-step. Poor guy. That'll be 20 push-ups during tonight's evening drill. In this quiet rhythm of morning drills and solemn walks, you find a peculiar peace. You are, in every sense, a blade sheathed in ceremony. You don't just protect a body, you preserve a world of manners, silence, and perfectly timed bows. And your biggest fear right now isn't a rogue assassin, it's forgetting which foot to start with when entering the tatami room. One wrong step, and that tea-serving servant will outrank you in grace. You trail behind your daimyo like a breeze, felt but never seen. Today, he's visiting a bustling merchant district near the edge of the castle town. And you? You're the quiet shadow between him and the world. Your presence is known only to those trained to notice. Like a whisper tucked in the folds of silk. You move through the crowd, carefully calibrating your pace. You stay close, but not too close. Your job is to look entirely unremarkable, to blend into the street's rhythm like a leaf in the current. The goal is to never attract attention. Not even from a child tugging on his mother's sleeve, pointing at your finely wrapped katana. You don't meet his eyes. Instead, you scan rooftops, alley mouths, second-story windows, any place a real or imagined threat might linger. It's funny, in a sad sort of way. Most samurai bodyguards in the Edo period never fought a single duel. Not once. You may have mastered the swift draw, the elegant iajutsu, but your greatest triumph is how well you vanish into the background. Your sandals slap softly against stone as you walk under paper lanterns and woven signs. The aroma of miso, charcoal, and fish broth blend with the tang of ink and wet cloth. Your daimyo nods at a bookseller, pauses at a stand of ironware. He gestures for tea. That's your cue. You quietly step ahead to clear space, giving the tea vendor a look that says, "Move quickly, speak softly." Historians still debate whether samurai bodyguards like you were truly invisible, or simply trained to occupy social space without disturbing its surface. Some writings suggest that samurai could alter their presence by intent alone, becoming effectively unseeable. Others say that's just romantic nonsense layered on top of rigid etiquette. Either way, you've learned the fine art of invisible authority. And it's harder than any sword technique. You notice a man who seems too still near a basket cart. Your body tenses for a breath, then relaxes as he bends to scratch his leg. No threat. You look away calmly, but not before noting the frayed edge of his robe. Just in case. Your daimyo begins to move again, and you shift into motion smoothly, shadowing every gesture, anticipating every stop. You already know he'll visit the incense stall next, he always does. You take a half step wider to make room. The seller is elderly, with one cloudy eye and fingers permanently stained yellow from resin. You exchange the briefest glance. He bows too low. You nod once. That's enough. And then, you feel it. The brief weight of eyes. You can't explain it, but you know it. Someone is watching. You pause for just a half heartbeat, pretending to fix your sleeve. There, on a second-story balcony, a woman hangs laundry, but her attention is down here, on you. Not the daimyo. You meet her gaze and she flinches, then quickly steps back inside. Was she a threat? Probably not. But she broke the social rhythm. She noticed the bodyguard, not the lord. That's wrong. That's dangerous. Later, you'll write a short report on her. Just in case. It might seem strange to obsess over such tiny moments, but this is your world. Silence, distance, and flow. You learn to feel when something's off the beat, like a drum miss in an otherwise perfect song. A mainstream fact, during the Edo period, it was not unusual for samurai bodyguards to undergo training not just in martial arts, but also in music, poetry, and subtle psychology. The ability to read intention from the smallest shift in behavior was considered just as critical as swordsmanship. And if you're wondering, no, there is no dramatic rooftop chase today. No assassin disguised as a noodle vendor. Just another quiet stroll beneath fluttering banners and the scent of chestnut sweets. Your daimyo finishes his errands. You guide him back through the thinning crowd. He does not acknowledge you. He never does. But that's the job. You are wind beneath silk. Step behind shadow. A presence designed to be forgotten. And tonight, when you lie on your tatami mat and listen to the garden frogs chirp, you'll review every detail of this walk in your mind. The girl with the laundry. The sneeze from a passing monk. The dog that barked once, then stopped. All of it becomes a quiet map of risk. Filed away. Labeled in your head with the care of a librarian. You kneel beside the sliding screen as your lord sips his tea, the cup delicate between his fingers. You're close enough to intervene should disaster strike, but not so close that your presence disturbs the serene dance of ritual hospitality. Behind you, the paper door gently rustles with the breeze, its sound barely audible over the quiet slosh of tea poured into porcelain. You've done this exact thing dozens of times. Today's setting is a high-ranking guest's reception room, where the conversation is so polite and empty you wonder if everyone's actually asleep with their eyes open. You kneel, back straight, hands placed precisely on your thighs. Time ceases to pass. Your sword rests by your hip. It's lacquered, polished, sacred, but also totally unnecessary at the moment. Because your role right now isn't lethal protector. It's something between silent furniture and emotionally available butler. That's right. Being a samurai bodyguard also means serving tea, refilling cups, and fanning your lord's neck if the summer heat creeps in. Sometimes, it feels like being an elite member of a royal waiting staff, with very sharp accessories. You shift your weight ever so slightly, your knee brushing the floor. This tiny move allows better blood flow to your numb foot, but you're careful not to rattle a single tatami reed. One misstep, and the other guards will raise an eyebrow. Worse, the tea mistress might tut. Historians still argue whether these multi-role duties diluted the honor of samurai or expanded their cultural significance. Some insist that pouring tea showed humble devotion, while others believe it was a form of disguised humiliation imposed by higher lords seeking absolute control. Either way, you've become a master of switching roles mid-sip. One moment, you're evaluating the angle of a stranger's eyes for malice. The next, you're kneeling with a tray of fresh sweets, praying you don't drop them in your lord's lap. The quirky bit? Some bodyguards were known to carry elaborate fans, not for decoration, but to subtly communicate during high-stakes meetings. A slight flick might mean threat approaching. A flutter to the left. Too much sake, prepare to catch him. One fan was even rumored to hold a hidden blade, though most agree that's more bedtime myth than museum fact. Today, your lord gestures for more tea. You rise, hands flat, every movement rehearsed in the long corridors of etiquette school. You step to the side, glide across the floor with the grace of a stage actor. Not a ripple in your robe. You pour, bow, return. All while tracking the body language of the guest seated 10 feet away. He hasn't blinked in a while. Could be nerves. Could be poison. You note it for later. A gentle cough behind the screen reminds you that another guard is stationed there, unseen, unmoving, probably fighting the same battle against pins and needles' legs. You don't envy him. You wonder, sometimes, whether modern bodyguards would survive this kind of multitasking madness. No sunglasses, no earpiece. Just eyes, ears, and an endless memory for who likes their tea at which temperature. Your foot begins to tingle again. You ignore it. Outside, wind brushes through the pine trees in the garden, making the chimes jingle like lazy ghosts. The conversation turns to taxes and rainfall. You do not react, but inside, your spirit groans. There is nothing more boring, and therefore more dangerous, than a truly dull meeting. Assassins love to strike during boredom. At least, that's the saying. You've yet to meet one. As your lord prepares to stand, you move first. You glide behind him, positioning yourself perfectly to intercept a trip, a dagger, or an accidental footstool collision. All equally probable threats, in your experience. You pass the doorway. Another servant bows. You return it with your eyes only. You note everything, the tray's leftover snacks, the moist spot on the mat, the way the guest's sleeve barely brushed a cup. Is it important? Probably not. But that's not your call. You remember anyway. By sunset, you've played sword-bearer, tier-runner, human umbrella, and background decor. All without drawing your blade or your lord's attention. Which means you've succeeded. And tonight, when the guards gather in the quarters, you'll probably joke about how the tea was too bitter, or how the guest stared like a carp with a headache. And you'll laugh softly, because laughter is the only time your spine isn't required to be perfectly straight. You settle into your evening post, just outside the inner chambers. There's a soft rustle of sliding doors behind you, and the low thud of a maid's steps disappearing down the corridor. Soon, the entire compound will quiet to a hush, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the wind dancing through bamboo. This is the part of the day where the real discipline begins, not with swords, but with silence. You're not allowed to speak, of course. Not even to the guard across from you, who's been eyeing the same crack in the wall for 20 minutes now. If he's dozing, you can't tell. You hope he's just practicing advanced stillness. That's what you tell yourself, anyway. The language of a samurai bodyguard isn't made of words. It's woven through the subtlest of gestures, a glance to the right, a shift of weight, the twitch of a kimono sleeve. A full conversation might be held in 3 shared nods and 1 well-timed eyebrow raise. You've once warned of a misplaced servant using just the way you set your fan down. The joke among the junior guards is that you could express an entire play just by folding and unfolding your sleeves. Honestly, they're not wrong. Today, you're stationed near your daimyo's sleeping quarters, but he's not in bed yet. He's writing a letter, his brush making soft swishing sounds across paper. You listen with one ear, and scan with both eyes. The candlelight casts fluttering shadows, making each movement in the corridor seem suspicious. One time, a loose curtain frightened an entire wing of guards into drawing their blades. You've never let yourself live that down. Historians still argue whether this level of behavioral microcommunication evolved naturally or was a deliberately codified system. Some sources suggest specific sleeve signals were documented in clan scrolls, passed down like secret battle tactics. Others argue it's all projection, with modern scholars romanticizing a bunch of bored guards sitting around avoiding eye contact. Either way, you've grown fluent in a language most people will never hear. You remember your training, how to convey a warning with a cough, how to signal, ready, by shifting your left foot a quarter inch. How to tell someone it's their turn on night watch by placing your teacup slightly to the left of the hearth. The most important rule: don't break the stillness unless absolutely necessary. In Edo-period castles, noise was a failure. You didn't want to be the guy who dropped a chopstick, let alone the one who let a conversation slip into audibility. You once sneezed during the cherry blossom ceremony. Just once. You still get reminded of it. The fringe fact. Some bodyguards were trained to recognize different types of footsteps by sound alone. They could supposedly identify which household member was approaching simply by the weight and cadence of their stride. Whether that's true or not, you've definitely grown good at predicting which servant is carrying sake versus soup. You blink slowly. The candle gutters. Your muscles ache, but you remain motionless. You've trained years for this moment, not fighting a war, but being a silent presence so familiar, so constant, it becomes invisible. You're the room's calm heartbeat. Then, you hear it. A soft clack. Not a footstep. Not a door. Something else. You glance sideways, and so does the other guard. Both of you frown slightly. You rise together, just enough to investigate, only to find a fallen inkstone lid. The daimyo flicks his eyes toward it, then back to his letter. He says nothing. You bow and return to your post. Crises averted, 0. Mission status, perfect. You sigh softly through your nose, and return to scanning. Your eyes rest briefly on the koi lantern outside. Its paper frame sways in the night air, casting fish-shaped shadows against the wall. Sometimes, you wonder what it would be like to scream in a place like this. Not in anger. Just for the sensation. Just to shatter the stillness. You imagine the echo bouncing through wooden halls, scattering centuries of calm. You smile to yourself. Then promptly erase that smile. A wandering servant might see and report it. The night deepens. The silence grows heavier. The guards remain as still as stones. You don't move, don't speak, and don't breathe too loud. Because in this world, silence is your sword. Your sword gleams faintly in the dim morning light. Not from fresh blood or battle glory, of course, but from 3 hours of obsessive polishing. Again. You sit on your knees in the equipment chamber, a cloth in one hand and a small vial of clove-scented oil in the other. The blade is already spotless. But you work it anyway, tracing its perfect edge with a reverence that borders on holy. This is not vanity. This is duty. And also, frankly, boredom. As a samurai bodyguard, your katana is less a weapon and more a ceremonial extension of your spine. You draw it only for drills, parades, or on rare occasions when someone drops a tray too loudly and all the guards panic for no reason. Yet you polish it every day, like it's your most used tool. Your grip is gentle but firm, the way you'd cradle a sleeping child, or a delicate metaphor you're not quite sure you understand. Still, there's comfort in the rhythm. Dip the cloth, slide it down the blade's curve, pause at the tip. Breathe. Repeat. It's meditative. Or maddening. Depends on the day. The room smells like oiled wood and faint sandalwood incense. A fellow guard sits beside you, his blade across his lap, muttering old poetry as he wipes it down. He's working on a haiku about moonlight on a clean blade. He's been working on it for 2 weeks. It's not very good. Historians still argue whether this ritualistic maintenance was more psychological than practical. Some say it trained the mind into a constant state of readiness, like a cat coiled in a sunbeam. Others argue it was performative, a way for samurai to feel useful when the actual threat level hovered somewhere between mildly annoyed squirrel and tripped over a teacup. Quirky side note. Some samurai used their polishing rags for decades, refusing to replace them out of superstition. One tale tells of a cloth so old it was believed to contain the spirit of its master's first battle, despite him never having fought one. You test the blade's balance. Perfect. You tilt it just slightly so the light hits the engraving on the tang, a simple family crest. Your fingers pause there. This weapon has been passed down 4 generations. It's never seen a real fight. There's a kind of tragic poetry to that. Your superior enters the room and gives you a half nod of approval. That's basically a standing ovation in samurai culture. You bow. He doesn't say anything, he doesn't need to. Your blade speaks for you. You sheath it with care, hearing the soft shff as steel kisses lacquer. There's something deeply satisfying about that sound. It's cleaner than applause. Next, you check your tanto, your short blade. It's mostly used to cut fruit for your lord. Sometimes you fantasize about slicing apples with dramatic flair, like one of those traveling entertainers. But you don't. You just make neat slices and hand them over without expression. As you return the cleaning tools to their precise shelf locations, no dust allowed, you glance toward the practice yard. A few junior guards are sparring. The clack of wooden swords echoes faintly. You allow yourself 1 minute to watch. They're good. Fast. Precise. Too precise, maybe. You've learned the real threats aren't always fast or loud, they're quiet, patient, slow. Just like you. Your fingers itch to join, but that's not your role anymore. You're senior. A watcher. A blade in wait. You head back to the inner quarters. Another bodyguard nods as you pass. You trade no words, just a shared understanding. Today, like yesterday, your sword will gleam, but remain sheathed. And that, oddly enough, is the greatest success of all. Your stomach growls softly, a gentle reminder that it's time for the mid-morning meal. Nothing exciting, of course, your diet is as disciplined as your posture. You kneel on the veranda with the other guards, each with the same wooden tray in front of them. Rice, boiled barley, a few pickled vegetables, maybe a slice of dried radish if the cook is feeling generous. No seasoning. No second helpings. And absolutely no complaints. You eat slowly, chewing each bite with the seriousness of a man savoring his last meal, every day. The rice is lukewarm, and the barley sticks to your teeth, but you focus. Not on flavor, but on presence. You must be alert, even when eating. One eye on the tray, the other on the garden path. Just in case someone tries something silly while the Lord's bodyguards are temporarily distracted by steamed root vegetables. Of course, no one ever does. This isn't a theater play. There are no surprise attacks hidden behind a bamboo bush. You've had meals disturbed only twice in your 10-year career, once by a catfight, once by a drunken courier tripping over a sandal. Both events were tragic, in their own ways. But still, you watch. Historians still argue whether the severe dietary restrictions of Edo-period samurai were a form of self-control training or simply due to budget limitations. Some clans prided themselves on their minimalist menus, believing culinary restraint reflected moral purity. Others, less poetically, just couldn't afford fancier food. You sip your miso soup, it's thin, mostly broth, and carries the faint suggestion of seaweed. You try not to slurp too loudly. Sound matters, even in soup. There's a technique to it: tilt the bowl just right, draw the liquid with a gentle breath, no splash. It takes practice. The quirky part. Some bodyguards developed food-related rituals for luck. One senior guard you trained with used to always eat the pickled plum first, believing it coated the soul. Another refused to eat his radish unless it pointed due north. You've adopted none of these customs, but you do count every grain of rice left in your bowl. Always. Even if it means scraping the corners like a monk scouring a prayer. You finish your meal in silence. A maid collects the trays with quiet bows. You stand, stretch slowly, and return to your post. By now, the sun is higher, and heat begins to rise off the courtyard stones. You adjust your robe subtly to allow better airflow. Not enough to be noticeable, but enough to feel. It's a fine art, cooling yourself without appearing flustered. The young guards sweat openly. Fools. Soon, the daimyo will take his midday rest. Your job then will be to guard the door. Not with sword drawn, but with calm posture, fixed gaze, and total bladder control. You once stood unmoving for 2 hours, knees aching, while your lord napped through a rainstorm. Your reward? He didn't die. Success. You think, sometimes, of the food the daimyo eats: lavish fish, rare mushrooms, sweet rice cakes shaped like cherry blossoms. You will never taste them. Not unless there's poison involved. Then you might get one bite. As a test. Your current meal is long gone, but it sits in your stomach like a quiet stone. Solid. Stable. Unimpressed. Just like you. The breeze brings a smell from the kitchen, something grilled, something glorious, and you sigh softly. Then you glance left to see if anyone noticed. Another guard catches your eye. He's smiling. You both return to stillness. Not because anyone told you to. Because that's what bodyguards do. You resist. You endure. You observe. And you always chew slowly. You kneel at the back of the audience chamber, again. The hard floor presses into your knees like time itself, indifferent and eternal. In front of you, your lord sits at perfect attention. His robes are freshly arranged. His hair is neat. His breathing even. You mimic that stillness, eyes soft but aware, spine straight but not rigid. It's not about strength, it's about endurance. The chamber is silent except for the soft scratching of brush on paper and the occasional murmur from a visiting magistrate. The scent of incense curls through the air, a mix of sandalwood and something vaguely floral. It's calming, but also dangerous. You must not relax. Relaxation invites sleep. Sleep invites shame. You shift your weight slightly, just to the left. One toe's gone numb. You do this so subtly that even the dust motes wouldn't notice. Well done. You're becoming a master of the art of sitting still. This is, surprisingly, one of the most demanding parts of your duty. Hours can pass without movement. You've sat through legal disputes, ceremonial poetry readings, and, once, a full day's lecture on bridge construction. That last one nearly ended your career. You nodded off for a full blink. A blink. But still. Historians still argue whether these long periods of stillness were intended purely as court etiquette, or whether they served as psychological endurance tests. Some believe the ability to remain motionless for hours was considered a form of passive intimidation. Others say it was just part of the exhausting formality of Edo-period governance, an attempt to prove refinement through total bodily control. You once had to sit still while a visiting monk read a list of 128 temple donors. Out loud. Twice. In reverse order. You considered biting your own tongue just to cause a scene and end the misery. You didn't. But you thought about it. There's no clock in this room, of course. You track time by the slow movement of sunlight across the tatami. When the golden bar of light reaches the third seam in the floor, it's usually time for the next round of tea. You live for that moment. Not for the tea, but for the excuse to adjust your knees. The quirky part. Some samurai developed silent, sitting games, to endure these sessions. You've heard of bodyguards who counted the brushstrokes in calligraphy scrolls or practiced imaginary battles in their heads. If this scroll came to life and attacked, how would I respond? You've done it too. Just yesterday, you imagined a rogue plum roll bouncing down the corridor like a slow, delicious threat. Your eyes rest on a scroll hanging on the far wall. You've memorized every crease in it. The crane motif is slightly crooked. No one else seems to notice. You notice everything. Someone shifts. The magistrate coughs into his sleeve. Your hand twitches, a fraction of an inch closer to your blade, not because there's danger, but because that's what you do. Always poised. Always prepared. For what? Who knows? Your daimyo clears his throat. You listen, alert. It's not the usual signal, just a clearing. Still, your body tenses for a beat. Ready. Then relaxes again. You're so still that a fly lands on your sleeve. You don't flinch. You don't swat. You name him Mitsuo and mentally wish him a good day. The magistrate drones on about river tolls. Your eyes glaze for a moment, but your posture does not betray you. You remain exactly as you were, silent, invisible, unmoving. You are a pillar. A quiet blade. A professional kneeler. The sun has now reached the tatami seam. You breathe in. Not tea yet, but close. You count your heartbeats, 1, 2, 3, then lose track. That's fine. You'll count again. When the session finally ends, your legs are stiff and cold. You rise slowly, with the grace of a man pretending not to be in pain. You bow once, low, deep, perfect. Then you step back into the hallway. No one claps. No one thanks you. But you know what you've accomplished. You have survived another day of sitting completely still. The court has dispersed, and with it goes the suffocating silence. But don't get too comfortable, your next task is just as peculiar, if slightly more amusing. You make your way to the shaded alcove near the koi pond, where a cluster of guards are already whispering. Whispering, of course, with great restraint. Gossip, after all, is still an art form in this world. Welcome to the odd realm of samurai bodyguard politics, a quiet chess game played with tea refills, seating arrangements, and the angle of your bow. You sit carefully on the wooden platform, where the lacquer is worn smooth by decades of discreet murmurs. One of the junior guards raises an eyebrow at you. That means, did you hear what Lord Aiyama did at the moon viewing party? You raise only your lower eyelids in reply. Translation, only if it's good. This is how samurai bodyguards share news, layered in gestures, brief phrases, and knowing silences. Saying too much is considered vulgar. The best gossip is a puzzle. Historians still argue whether samurai guards were actually encouraged to observe and report court behavior, or if this watchfulness evolved naturally out of sheer boredom. Some scrolls mention silent observation duty, a vague term that likely includes everything from counting sake cups to decoding who didn't clap at the end of a poetry recital. Today's hot topic. A certain lord's new concubine, who apparently laughed during the incense ceremony. Laughed. Audibly. There are 3 distinct theories circulating about why, one of which involves a sneezing cat and a falling paper lantern. You do not contribute your opinion. You merely sip your tea. This kind of idle court politics doesn't seem deadly. Until it is. You've seen careers end because of a misplaced fan. You once watched a man get reassigned to firewood inventory for offering a second helping of mochi to the wrong noble's wife. No blade. Just etiquette warfare. The quirky bit. Bodyguards sometimes used poetry as code. A short verse could be packed with judgment. The plum blossoms late this year might mean your lord is slow-witted, depending on tone and timing. One senior samurai you know wrote an entire insult in haiku once, disguised as a weather report. The recipient bowed, smiled, and avoided him for months. You glance at the koi pond. The fish circle slowly, unbothered by rank or rumor. You envy them. Suddenly, one of the guards leans toward you ever so slightly. New sandals, he murmurs. You follow his gaze. Sure enough, the daimyo's cousin, who just arrived, is wearing woven sandals imported from Nagasaki. Extremely fine. Suspiciously fine. Trying too hard, you ask. Definitely, he replies. A full conversation, 6 syllables. It's enough. Some days, this is what passes for action in the world of samurai bodyguards, decoding social strategy, noticing who stands a little too close to whom, interpreting why the incense was lit with lavender instead of pine. No one draws a sword, but reputations live and die here, one eyebrow raise at a time. You sip your tea again. It's lukewarm now, but still better than court silence. You let your shoulders ease. Just a touch. The gossip circle has its own tension, lighter, but more treacherous. Then a bell rings in the inner chamber. Time to return. You rise, bow, adjust your robe. The koi ripple as you pass. Somewhere behind you, another guard whispers, plum blossoms early this year. You don't respond. You just smile inside. He'll be transferred to kitchen duty by next week if he's not careful. And just like that, the quiet chessboard resets. You didn't mishear. The order is real, you've been assigned to escort the daimyo's favorite dog. Not his son. Not a visiting diplomat. A small, puffball of a Shiba Inu named Kiku, who wears a tiny silk vest and has her own lacquered palanquin. She's not dangerous. She's not trained. She's not even polite. But she is, somehow, more important than half the humans you've guarded. And so you walk at her side. You're in full formal wear, of course, your robes pristine, your hair carefully pinned, your katana polished to an irrelevant gleam. Kiku walks with short, snorting steps, her curled tail bouncing like a question mark. You try not to sigh audibly. The funny part? She has 2 dedicated attendants of her own, one to carry her water dish, another to shield her from sunlight with a tiny parasol. You, the highly trained samurai bodyguard, are there to protect her from, what, jealous cats? Runaway carts? Still, you take it seriously. Because your lord does. Historians still argue whether these animal escort duties were ceremonial, symbolic, or simply an outlet for powerful nobles to exercise their whims. Some records suggest that guarding animals was considered a high-trust assignment, a sign you were deeply trusted. Others insist it was punishment in disguise, a demotion dressed in fur. Your fellow guards laugh behind closed doors, of course. "How's Princess Kiku today?" they'll ask with a bow so deep it nearly scrapes the floor. You respond with the same grace, snored through the lotus garden again. The quirky part? There are accounts of samurai writing haiku about their lord's pets. One infamous verse. Bark echoes through halls / a lord's breath held, I stand still / fur shakes with fury. You wish you'd written that. Today's walk leads you past the estate gardens. The cherry trees have begun to shed, and their petals stick to Kiku's fur. You brush them away delicately. She growls once, but you know she doesn't mean it. Probably. You scan the horizon anyway. There's a servant rushing toward the garden gate, late, out of breath. You stiffen, shift your stance. Just as your hand moves toward your hilt, the man trips over his own sandals and crashes into a wheelbarrow of leeks. Kiku barks once in what you swear is laughter. You don't draw your blade. But you do nod to one of the attendants. That servant won't be sprinting around nobles again anytime soon. The palanquin arrives for the return trip. Kiku hops inside and immediately flops sideways, panting. You follow alongside, making sure the bearers walk with care. The dog weighs, maybe, 12 pounds. But you've seen nobles lose face over far smaller slights. When you return to the residence, your lord is waiting. He says nothing. But he glances at Kiku, then at you. Then, ever so slightly, he nods. You bow in return. Because in this world, that was a full promotion speech. Later, during evening tea, one of the other guards raises an eyebrow and asks, "So, she survived?" "She tried to lick a bee," you reply. It did not end well for the bee. Laughter. Real, quiet laughter. Then silence again. You think about that nod your lord gave. For a moment, you felt, noticed. Not just present, but seen. It's rare. It's fleeting. And it's more satisfying than applause. Even if it came after guarding a dog. There are days when you almost wish something would happen. A real threat. A hidden blade. A poisoned dumpling. Anything to break the monotony. But instead, what you get are rumors, soft-spoken, swirling like mist around the castle walls. Whispers that an assassin may have slipped into town. That someone spotted a shadow on the roof. That a strange traveler asked too many questions near the grain store. You don't react. You never do. But your eyes sharpen. Your posture tightens. Because the absence of action is not the absence of danger. You spend the next several days in a heightened state of awareness, patrolling the outer walls, checking hidden entrances, rehearsing silent responses with your fellow guards. You review maps, memorize guest lists, track deliveries. And you never say why. That's the way it works. Rumors don't come with explanations. Just long stretches of anxious quiet. Historians still argue whether most of these rumors were real or simply fabrications passed down by paranoid gatekeepers. Some believe these low-level alerts were created to keep the guards alert without any actual threats. Others suggest they were a way for rival families to sow discontent from within, keeping retainers on edge, guessing, doubting each other. You've heard a dozen such warnings in your career. Once, someone claimed a female performer in the Lord's theater troupe had hidden a dagger in her fan. Another time, it was a tea vendor whose sugar was too refined to be local. Each time, nothing happened. And yet, each time, you prepared as if it might. This time, the rumor is vague, someone from the north has been asking strange questions. No names. No details. You're simply told to remain vigilant. So you do. You station yourself near the kitchen hall for 3 hours, pretending to inspect firewood. You watch the servants chop root vegetables. You watch a child try to steal a rice ball. You hear a sneeze echo through a corridor and think, for just a moment, it might be a signal. It isn't. Later, You walk past the carp pond and notice a new gardener sweeping with too much enthusiasm. You pause. He bows. His posture is fine. But his sandals are too new. You note it. Quietly. You tell no one. Yet. The quirky bit. Some samurai believed certain birds could predict violence. If a crow cawed 3 times in the west, it meant death. If a crane circled overhead, it meant betrayal. You don't believe in omens, but you still watch the sky. Just in case. That night, the castle is unusually still. You patrol slowly, your footsteps muffled by damp earth and fallen blossoms. You breathe through your nose, every sense extended like the tip of your sword. Nothing happens. Again. And yet, that in itself feels like victory. You return to the inner quarters and sit by the paper screen, eyes half-lidded, hands relaxed, but not limp. You feel your pulse in your fingertips, matching the steady rhythm of silence. The new gardener. Turns out he's real. Came from a trusted house. Just happens to be overly cheerful. The northern traveler. Just a poet. Terrible at poetry. Even worse at directions. Still, you feel no regret. You sharpen your senses like you polish your blade, not for use, but for certainty. You train for the storm that never comes. And you take quiet pride in the fact that no one in the estate ever sees it. Or thanks you. Or even notices. Because nothing happened. And that was exactly the point. It's well past midnight when you slide open the outer panel of the tea house. The paper lanterns inside cast a soft glow across polished wooden floors, and the air is thick with the scent of steeped leaves and lacquer. Your daimyo sits cross-legged, flanked by 2 elderly advisors, all 3 cradling tiny porcelain cups. Their voices are low, their laughter muffled, their eyes, sharp. You kneel silently in your corner, just outside the circle of conversation. You are both present and absent, body still but mind in motion. This is one of the more delicate duties of a samurai bodyguard, listening without listening. The walls of this tea house are paper thin, and so is the line between trust and betrayal. A common misconception, the tea house is a place of rest. Maybe for the guests. Not for you. For you, it's a stage. And every sip, every joke, every raised eyebrow is a potential clue. Because sometimes the most dangerous words are whispered between sips of jasmine and swirls of steam. Historians still argue whether bodyguards were meant to act as passive furniture in these situations or serve as subtle watchdogs, trained to read the wind behind the words. Some clans expected their guards to report on conversations afterward, others believed even remembering a lord's idle joke was a punishable offense. Your clan falls somewhere in between. You're not expected to repeat anything. But you are expected to remember everything. The quirky bit. Some samurai develop techniques to stay fully awake during long, slow conversations, like using tea leaves tucked under their tongue, or pinching their toes in their sandals. One infamous guard reportedly carved a tiny mantra into his thumbnail and stared at it to stay alert. You have your own method. You trace the layout of the estate in your mind. Room by room. Door by door. You count all the exits from the tea house, including the one behind the decorative scroll. You catalog every sound, the whistle of steam from the kettle, the soft scrape of porcelain, the occasional sniffle from the oldest advisor. No threats, but worth noting. Your lord says something that draws laughter. You allow the faintest twitch of your mouth, just enough to seem relaxed, not so much to seem invested. You are a shadow with good posture. At one point, a servant stumbles slightly while pouring. You clock it, instinctively shifting your balance to stand if needed. But the spill is caught, the napkin deployed, and the conversation flows on. Still, the moment stays filed away. You watch how the advisors sit, who leans forward, who plays with his sleeve, who avoids eye contact. These things speak louder than words. You once witnessed a plan to disinherit a younger son unfold in complete silence, decided by where three men placed their cups. Time drags. Your knees ache again. You count breaths. You focus on the way the candle flickers and try to predict when it'll gutter out. Your body is a statue. Your mind is a recording. Eventually, your daimyo rises, signaling the meeting's end. The advisors bow. You're already moving, rising as one fluid shape, opening the door just as your lord turns toward it. No words. No cues. Just perfect timing. He walks out. You follow. Outside, the air is cool. Crickets hum. The night is still. And you think, another round of secrets safely stored. No one will thank you. But someone could have poisoned that tea. Someone could have slipped a knife beneath that robe. Someone could have said something unforgettable. But they didn't. Because you were there. You'll go back to your quarters now. You'll sleep for a few hours. You'll wake before sunrise. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Guarding silence. Listening to what no one says. The clouds have rolled in by morning, thick and sulking. You stand at the edge of the walkway, watching as the first drops of rain begin to fall on the carefully raked gravel. The garden will be ruined by noon, but that isn't your concern today. Your concern is standing dry. Not you, of course, you'll be soaked. But your lord? Never. It's umbrella duty. Now, this might sound simple. Hold a parasol over your daimyo's head while he strolls from one wing of the estate to the other. But in reality, it's a miniature battle of timing, posture, and strategic endurance. You adjust the lacquered frame in your hand, angling it precisely so the rain falls away from his collar but doesn't block his view. The umbrella's curve must match his stride. Not too high. Not too low. And it must not wobble. He hates wobble. The umbrella itself is a finely crafted object, red paper stretched taut over bamboo ribs, waxed to repel water. Lightweight, elegant, but in strong wind. A menace. More than one guard has watched their parasol turn inside out and flutter off like a fleeing crane. You won't be that guard. Historians still argue whether umbrella duty was a mark of honor or a quiet form of punishment. Some suggest only the most trusted were allowed this task, as you're literally within arm's reach of your lord's head. Others believe it was given to whoever drew the short straw that morning. Either way, you're here now. The quirky bit? Some guards developed techniques to mask the splatter of rain on their robes by wearing an extra inner layer that absorbed moisture silently. One legendary umbrella bearer was said to walk so steadily that a single drop never touched the hem of his lord's sleeve across a half-mile trek. You are not yet legendary, but you aim high. Your daimyo appears, stepping carefully onto the wooden deck. You step forward in perfect sync, raising the umbrella just as he clears the overhang. He does not look at you. He shouldn't have to. You walk. The rain is light at first, tapping against the paper like 1,000 fingers trying to get your attention. You ignore it. Your pace is matched to the exact rhythm of your lord's steps. You tilt the umbrella just so as he turns toward the southern hall. Soon, the wind picks up. The umbrella strains. You adjust again, barely, subtly, like a bow without movement. Your shoulder aches, but your grip holds steady. Your other hand rests lightly on your sword, out of habit more than need. A servant passes the opposite way, clumsily using his sleeve for cover. You catch a flash of pity in his glance. You do not return it. This is your station, and you hold it with pride. You once stood like this for over an hour during a garden tour that turned into an impromptu haiku contest. Your robes clung to your back. Your sandals squelched with every step. But your umbrella? Immaculate. Your lord never noticed the storm. That, too, was success. Today, the path is shorter. Just across the courtyard and back. But the rain thickens, and the wind swirls. A single drop hits your forehead and trails down your temple. You do not blink. The umbrella doesn't shift. By the time your lord steps under the next roof, your arms are trembling slightly. You lower the umbrella and bow. He pauses. He glances, not at you, but at the umbrella. Then nods. It's brief. Barely perceptible. But it's enough. You've passed the test. Again. Later, soaked and stiff, you'll sit by the stove in the guards' quarters, peeling off your wet inner robe and wringing it out like a rag doll. Another guard might joke, still dry up top. And you'll nod, because that's what matters. You don't guard with swords alone. You guard with presence. With timing. With a perfectly steady umbrella. And when your hand stops shaking, you'll hang it up to dry, carefully. Reverently. Because tomorrow, it might rain again. The courtyard is calm today. No meetings. No visitors. No rain. Just stillness. That's usually a good sign, until you're summoned to the East Pavilion and handed an item that makes your eyebrows twitch, a fan. Not a battle fan. A decorative one. Painted with pink peonies. You're not here to fight. You're here to perform. Welcome to the strange, highly ritualized world of the paper fan duel. This is not a joke. 2 retainers from rival houses have requested a formal mediation. But since neither side wishes to dishonor their lord with drawn blades, or risk any actual injury, they've agreed to resolve their differences using tessen, ceremonial iron-ribbed fans. Except these fans aren't even iron. They're paper. Today's match is more theater than combat. You step onto the polished floor, across from another bodyguard dressed nearly identically to you, except his fan is decorated with waves instead of flowers. Symbolic, probably. He gives a small bow. You return it. Historians still argue whether these mock duels were genuine dispute resolutions or simply elaborate courtly distractions. Some claim they were exercises in ego management, allowing 2 proud men to lose with dignity. Others believe they originated from older, coded training drills that masked military tactics in harmless form. The truth? Doesn't matter. Because the duel is happening now. And you're expected to take it seriously. The quirky bit? Some fan duels included choreography, almost like a silent play. There were unwritten rules: don't strike too hard, never aim for the face, and make sure to fall convincingly if defeated. Style points mattered. Embarrassment was a fate worse than bruises. You and your opponent circle each other slowly. The audience is small: 2 stewards, 1 court scribe, and a sleepy cat. Tension buzzes faintly in the air. He strikes first, a quick flick toward your shoulder. You parry with your fan, the paper snapping taut. The sound echoes louder than it should. You step to the side and counter with a sweeping arc, tapping his ribs. He stumbles slightly. It's half-acted, half-genuine. The scribe makes a mark on his scroll. You both pause. Then continue. It's a dance, really. And one you're surprisingly good at. You step, pivot, fan fluttering in your hand like a butterfly with opinions. You don't know what the original disagreement was about, probably who stood too close to a senior lord during a poetry recital, but you channel all your focus into this flow of motion. By the end of the 3rd pass, your opponent bows slightly deeper than you. That's the silent way of conceding. You lower your fan. Return the bow. The stewards murmur. The scribe nods. It's over. No blood. No death. Just wounded pride and a gentle sigh of resolution. You return to your quarters with the fan still in hand. One of the junior guards looks at it and asks, "Victory?" You nod once. Flower or wave? Peony, you reply. The room chuckles softly. No one mocks. Everyone understands. In the strange hierarchy of samurai honor, even a paper fan can carry weight. You hang the fan on your wall. A reminder that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper. A flick. A graceful bow after pretending to be stabbed in the leg with painted paper. And honestly, you're proud of that. You sit quietly in the garden path, just out of view, watching the sun slide behind the rooftop tiles. The day is winding down, the shadows stretch long, and the air has taken on that dry hush that always arrives before evening. You're not on duty anymore. Technically. But you're still in uniform, still seated upright, and still carrying your sword. Because even off duty, you are never off guard. Tonight, there's no meeting, no visitor, no ceremonial duel. And yet, something feels heavy in your chest. Not bad. Just, full. You've been reflecting more lately. Maybe it's your age. Maybe it's the sound your knees make now when you stand. Or maybe it's the realization that you've spent most of your life guarding people from threats that never showed up. You look down at your hand, resting on the scabbard. Smooth from decades of touch. The blade within hasn't drawn blood once. And yet, it is the cleanest sword in the entire province. Historians still argue whether samurai bodyguards like you lived lives of wasted potential or elevated purpose. Some say a warrior who never draws his sword has failed to fulfill his destiny. Others argue that true strength is restraint, that the absence of violence is the clearest measure of peace. You don't speak on the matter. You just keep polishing. The quirky bit? Some samurai prepared death poems daily, even if they expected to live. Just in case. You've written yours too many times to count. Today's version was something about silence and falling leaves. You'll revise it tomorrow. You remember the first time you were told that death without drawing your sword was not only possible, it was noble. You thought it absurd. Now you understand. Because the blade is only the last answer. And your job is to resolve everything before the question gets that far. You recall the time you stepped between your lord and a nervous envoy, no weapons were drawn, but your posture alone changed the course of the meeting. The envoy bowed lower. The tone softened. A treaty was signed. You never even touched your hilt. You once held a crying child still enough for a midwife to safely deliver his fevered brother. No enemy. No duel. Just hands steady with purpose. You once intercepted a spilled ink stone before it ruined an ancestral scroll. That earned you a single nod. It felt like thunder. You don't chase glory anymore. You chase stillness. You measure success in the things that didn't happen, the fights that never started, the rumors that fizzled out, the disrespect that quietly dissolved because someone stood still at the right moment. And in all of this, your blade remains sheathed. Not from cowardice. But from mastery. You rise from your seated position slowly. Your joints protest. That's expected. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and adjust your robes. Then, almost without thinking, you draw the blade half an inch, just enough to hear the whisper of steel, and then slide it back. It's not for practice. It's for memory. Your life has been lived in that space between drawn and sheathed. A lifetime of poised intention. You head back to the main hall for final rounds. The halls are quiet. The lanterns glow. The guards bow slightly as you pass. You nod. Just enough. You pass a servant polishing the floor. She pauses and bows. You bow in return. That moment, too, is part of the duty. As you step into the inner chamber to take your place, your breath is calm, your grip relaxed. No danger tonight. Just the knowledge that, once again, nothing happened. And that you were there to ensure it. The old man you once called commander retired this morning. There was no ceremony. No scroll of honor. No lavish feast. Just a bow from the daimyo, a quiet exchange of thanks, and the slow shuffle of straw sandals against the veranda as he walked away for the last time. You watched him go without moving, your own hands folded neatly in your lap. But inside, something shifted, like a sliding panel behind your ribs, revealing a space you hadn't noticed before. Because today, for the first time, you felt it. The wind behind you. The one that whispers, "You're next." Retirement for a samurai bodyguard doesn't come with a golden fan or poems carved into stone. It comes with fading duties, lighter patrols, and younger men looking at you like a quiet relic. No one says it, but you can feel it in the way they now stand just slightly ahead of you in formation. The way your name comes later in the roll. You remember when you were the youngest, when you idolized the older guards and mimicked their every move. Now you are that older guard. The one who tells stories that begin with, "Back when the north gate still had the creaky hinge." Today, you're stationed at the western corridor, the one no one really bothers with unless it rains sideways. It's quiet. Peaceful. Almost insultingly so. But you don't mind. Because from this vantage point, you can see the garden pond, the practice yard, and the hallway where Kiku the Shiba Inu once tried to attack a sandal. Your whole career, in glimpses. Historians still argue whether older samurai were truly respected by their successors, or quietly nudged toward a gentle exit. Some scrolls suggest they were retained as symbolic figures, walking proof of loyalty and wisdom. Others claim they were shuffled off to monkhood or accounting when their knees began to crack. You're not ready for ink ledgers. And monkhood? You snore. Loudly. That alone would disqualify you. The quirky bit? Some senior bodyguards trained to sleep in half-alert states, upright against wooden posts. It said they could wake instantly if a single reed snapped. You tried it once. You woke up 3 hours later with a spider on your shoulder and an angry tea master yelling about snoring in the shrine. Still, tonight feels different. Not ominous. Just, full. You do your rounds, but slower now. Not from fatigue, well, maybe a little, but because you notice things more. The way the lanterns flicker with orange near the east wing. The pattern of moss creeping up the garden stones. A junior guard stifling a cough and pretending it didn't happen. You correct his stance gently. He bows. That will be your legacy, tiny corrections in posture. Lessons passed through fingertip nudges and brow lifts. When the patrol ends, you return to your quarters. You sit alone. You unsheath your sword and inspect it again. Not to polish this time. Just to look. It gleams in the lantern light. Familiar. Patient. A partner through a lifetime of near conflicts and unspoken victories. You whisper something, not to the blade, but to yourself. You're not even sure what it is. Then you sheath it for the final time tonight. The sound is soft. Clean. Final, in its own quiet way. You bow to the sword. To the empty room. To all the hours you have spent as a silent guardian. And as the breeze curls under the door, you let out the breath you didn't know you were holding. Wind down begins. Now, the lanterns dim. The footsteps fade. The floor beneath you is cool and steady, a familiar old friend. The sound of distant wind chimes becomes the backdrop to your thoughts, now soft, now gentle. You let your shoulders ease. The weight of duty slips quietly off your back, not with a clang, but like silk sliding from polished wood. There is no more patrolling tonight. No more watching corners or measuring footsteps or adjusting an umbrella to chase the drizzle. Just the hush of stillness, and the gentle thrum of your own calm breath. You sit a little longer. Eyes half-lidded. The blade beside you sleeps, too. And in this stillness, you are not a bodyguard. You are just a man. A soul at peace in the slow passage of time. Your work is done. You were never seen, but always present. And now, it's time to rest. Let the soft hum of the night carry you. Let the quiet become warmth. Let your breathing slow with the stars. You're safe. Everything is as it should be. Sleep, now.